This course was broadcasted live on November 20th, 2022, and was sponsored by Vimed Healthcare Staffing. Vimed is a nationwide expert in home-based respiratory care and disease management. They are dedicated to helping patients breathe better and live longer, healthier lives. They're an industry leader in treating respiratory patients in their homes with full-time respiratory therapists. They focus on education, providing 24/7 support, and lowering readmission rates. Vimed utilizes their respiratory therapists as both in-home care providers and patient care coordinators, where you market and educate directly in hospitals. If you are looking for a rewarding and great paying alternative to bedside care, please reach out. They are available through their website, or you can email Joshua Kriesman directly at jkriesman@vimedstaffing.com. Enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, it's Chandler again. Tonight we're going to be talking about something that I do now out in North Carolina, and something that I've heard about kind of through school back in 2017. Kind of heard about this role a little bit. And that's the role of Pulmonary Disease Navigator. And some of you have heard of the COPD Navigator. Maybe some of y'all have heard of, oncology navigators or congestive heart failure navigators, which is also something that I do. My technical role is complex disease navigator, complex case navigator, where I will see our pulmonary patients and our congestive heart failure patients, regardless of the stage, regardless of diagnostics, really. Some of these folks will have COPD will be labeled COPD with no PFTs, maybe CT doesn't state, emphysema, and the same goes with congestive heart failure. So we'll dive into this kind of a novel niche role type thing and kind of see how it is. So at the very end of my name, you see the PDE, right? So a little while ago, I believe it was AARC had the Pulmonary Disease Educator course. So through the state of North Carolina, I'm considered a, quote, advanced practitioner in regards to pulmonary education. So that's me. That's what I do. Let's dive in just a little bit. A couple objectives. We'll look at the Pulmonary Disease Navigator. We'll look at what they do, what they are, rather, what they do and who they work for. General requirements to become a Pulmonary Disease Navigator. So you do all that, you look at all that, you get all the stuff, you got the job, now what? So we'll kind of look at how the workflow, for me, anyway, how the workflow works. We'll look at a couple metrics for success. We'll look at the impact that pulmonary disease navigation has on patient care and facility revenue, in a sense. And we'll kind of look at some of the future needs. So patient navigation. So this is, I guess you could call just a big umbrella term, right? So patient navigation deals with everything from diabetes to congestive heart failure to oncology, generally about any type of disease you can think of. And sometimes the navigation portion of it is not disease specific. If you've ever sat in through my healthcare disparities lecture, you'll know that healthcare in and of itself is a disparity. It is a hindrance to care because it's just really hard to navigate, right? There's so many different layers and so many different paths one can take that it's hard for the patient particularly to kind of figure out what route is best, or are they being treated under a specific guideline? If not, why? Are there diagnostics that they need to have or should have had for a specific diagnosis and things like that? So general care navigation, we help patients to navigate the healthcare system to better manage their chronic illnesses, while also teaming up with the patient care team to tackle obstacles of care. And that's one of the things as an RT, of course, we have that interdisciplinary inner workings of what we do. You know, we speak with the nurse, we speak with the doctor, we speak with a number of different roles. But particularly for me, anyway, when I was working clinically, I never spoke with, you know, case management or social work or did any type of community outreach. And that's one of the big differences here. But yeah, we work with the patient, right? So I've always said that the patient is to me anyway, the biggest stakeholder in healthcare, be it financially, quality wise, what have you. We are patients, right? Or will be or have been. And we are the customers, we are the stakeholders, we are the ones that this directly impacts. But when we're thinking about disease navigation in general, there is no standard definition, right? So the first navigator started to kind of emerge in the 1980s and 1990s. And this all kind of formulated oncology-wise, anyway, in regards to cancers, by Dr. Freeman. He is known as the father of navigation, or I would say patient navigation. So Dr. Harold P. Freeman is the father of navigation. Now, I guess since maybe not so much for RT, but I do know some of the cardiac navigators that I work with and some of the oncology navigators, there are national and state certifications for this. I would have to imagine with the advent of micro credentials that maybe there may be facility wide, even more so specific. So now there are national and state conferences, certifications. So with this, the more you know, when certifications come out, there's generally a group of folks or a big group of folks that will go and get this brand new certification to prove their knowledge. And then just like with many other things, you know, it is some type of camaraderie. So there's the formation of societies and boards to try and help to govern, I really want to call it scope, but to try to lay out the standard practice, right? Harold P. Freeman. So what is the difference between, let's look at pulmonary navigation and case management? So they're very similar. Don't get me wrong. I work very, very close with our case managers. Case management, kind of in a nutshell, helps to patients follow established clinical protocols, which great thing, right? And promotes patient safety, quality of care, and cost-effective outcomes. These are all super great things, and I love my case managers. Navigation employs this with very specific, focused expertise, and that should make sense, right? Oncology navigator, pulmonary navigator, congestive heart failure navigator. So we take the navigators that I work with, particularly oncology and congestive heart failure, that's what they did. They're nurses, but that's what they did. One was an oncology nurse for 20 some years. The other two, congestive heart failure, worked in cardiac ICU for a number of years too. So when you work with these, just like we do as therapists, when you work with this specific type of patient population, well, you learn kind of the routes that you see every single day, right? Especially if you have good close contact with your physician, they're going to be like, oh yeah, you know, maybe they need some pulmonary rehab, or no, we got to get this patient seen out into the heart failure clinic, get them on some Entresto or something like that, right? So we take our very specific knowledge and we apply it rigorously to particular patients. I like it because it feels like, it's not quite, but it does feel like individualized care, individualized plans of care, which I've actually had to kind of go back. My fiance is a nurse. Of course, she's got care plans out the wazoo, and I've had to go back and be like, okay, you know, what is this? How do we formulate this care plan outside of just particularly respiratory, right? And we look at this patient and provide a holistic approach that includes the medical. We look at the biomedical model of what they need, and then we look at the social portion of it. Now, folks, I know y'all are following me here. So how many of us have asked a patient, maybe about their inhalers or DPIs, and been like, do you ever taste that medicine? Do you ever get it in your mouth? Whatever. Are you using it right? Show me how you're using it. Especially if you're given these medicines. Some facilities the nurse does, but in others the RT is giving the DPIs, home DPIs, and things like that. And the patient's like, oh yeah, absolutely, I taste it every single time, right? Or I see that you've been in here a bunch of times. Can you get your medicine? Right? And sometimes they can't. Sometimes they can, but they can't get there. Right? So there's a whole multiple layers to patient care that when I was working clinically, I just didn't think about. So we make care realistic and humanistic. So look at the little picture on the right. I see humans, but no humanity. Right? I feel like, and maybe some of you all do, that healthcare originally kind of started up. Hey, we want to help people. We want to figure out the body. We want to let people live long, strong lives. Right? That's the humanistic approach to it. I want to help you. I want you to feel better. I want you to live long. I want you to prosper. Right? But we make it very realistic. So one of the things that I do in my role is bring up the idea of palliative and hospice, palliative care and hospice care, and I break it down to the patients just as plain and in language that they can understand and that they can interpret, as realistic as I possibly can. If I have a stage 4, 2023 now. Gold guidelines standard stage 4 group E COPD patient, I'm going in and I'm like, hey, we need to start thinking about the end of this, right? You're at the end of it, but you haven't been, and we really need to start thinking about the end of this. Do you want to be careful? Do you want to go all out? What does the patient themselves want to do? And if they bring up something that I know is not going to work, let's say we have a 93-year-old patient with end-stage emphysema. They're like, oh yeah, can I get like bronchial stents or ablations or whatever? He's like, yeah, we can't do that, right? So we provide a holistic approach, we make it realistic, and we bring as much humanism into the environment that we can. A couple general requirements. Well, this is particularly was for my role. 3 to 5 years as a clinical practitioner, and as I kind of stated earlier, when you're working with this particular population of patients, and especially with our CEUs and everything like that, we realize that albuterol and ipratropium Duneb's just not going to do it for long-term maintenance, for instance, right? We know that as clinicians. We will know this patient is going to wear a BiPAP, or this patient, I bet you a full paycheck they won't, right? We know these patients as RTs, as pulmonary specialists. 3 to 5 years clinical practitioner. They generally want you to have a bachelor's degree in respiratory care, but they would much rather you have a master's degree, particularly in respiratory care. My master's degree is in healthcare administration, but they would like for you to have a master's degree in respiratory care, and you'll kind of see why that may be in just a little bit. 1 to 3 years of experience as an educator. So for my particular role in the state of North Carolina, that was a what would you call it? Required, not a preference, but a required thing for the job. So 1 to 3 years of experience as an educator. This can be clinically based. It can be academically, but in a classroom, online. They want to make sure that you're able, because when you're teaching, when you're educating, not everybody exactly is on the same level. Not everybody learns the same way. So they want you to be able to work around these things, especially when we're talking about inpatient, right? So I believe it was AARC, the pulmonary rehab certification course, that stated that roughly 12% of the American population is considered health literate. That's what, I don't, how many people's in the United States right now? 370, 380 million folks ish, right? That is not a lot of folks for all of us to inhabit a human body, not to know how it works or what type of medications we may need or how to use a prescription, even when it's laid out, what we would consider plain as day. So we've got to be able to educate our patients, and that's one of the biggest parts of my job. I generally try to spend about an hour with a patient on my initial encounter, and most of that hour, it's first of all, it's going over their diagnostics if I have them, looking at, are they still smoking, so on and so forth. But I educate them, right? Because when we educate, if you've listen to the ethics lecture that I give here, when you educate folks, they're able to be more autonomous, they're able to be more trusting and more involved with their healthcare, and in particular, they're able to make very good, very informed decisions. I won't say every time, but if applicable, obtain the pulmonary disease educator endorsement. So I know in the state of Tennessee, the only endorsement that we can get is ABG endorsed, as strange as that may seem. North Carolina has a number of them. I think they have 5 or 6 different endorsements for, quote, again, advanced practice RT type things. So for my role, this was a preference, not really a requirement, but I already had it. So much of the training is on the job, as there is no standardized program, right? So when I came to North Carolina and got into this role, I was still very, very much so clinical, right? They are very heavily RT protocol based, and I was in there doing assessments on patients and listening to breath sounds and all these things. And one of our leaders was like, "Yeah, no, we don't do that in this role," which is very strange to get over that. They were like, you can if you want, but particularly we don't want you to be doing that because you're not, quote, clinical anymore. Strange to hear that too, but there's no standardized program. So when you get on the job, the facility itself will have goals that you should be meeting and metrics that we'll see later that will evolve your skill as a pulmonary navigator outside of clinical practice. Knowledge, skills, and abilities are KSAs, right? For not only clinical, but administrative duties too. This is, I have an office now, so it was strange to, I had to learn how to use a fax machine, right? I can run life support, I can do CPR, I'm intubating, all those things, but that fax machine had me about to pull my hair out. So you have to know your clinical and your administrative duties too. So kind of like I said, the facility itself, because there is no standardized program or scope, the facility usually determines competencies such as determining the patient's needs and barriers and networking to close the gaps. So with kind of when you're thinking about this in a way, this is where your time with your patient really pays off. So I was consulting with a patient the other day, and the RT comes in, and I love my RTs here too. I'm always going to advocate for my RTs, and they were like, "Oh, wait a minute," and I was like, "Nope, come in, do your thing. I know you're very busy right now, especially with RSV and everything kicking up." And they were asking questions, they were involved with that patient and things like that. So determining the patient's needs and barriers and networking to close the gap. One of those, the big thing there is networking to close the gaps, right? Be it in the hospital, outside the hospital, however you think you can close those gaps is how you're going to do it. So yeah, there is no formal training for pulmonary disease navigation, specifically and especially for respiratory therapists. Y'all, we know how it goes, right? So with our nurse navigators, and actually there is a role just known as, quote, nurse navigator. There's particular trainings that the facility wants you to have. And when I came into this role, it was very, very new. There were 2 other RTs before me doing this, and they did a great job. It was just kind of off what they felt worked. So my particular part in this right now is figuring out how we can almost standardize it a little bit. But just know, if you find yourself in this role, hopefully I can kind of start something up and be a reference to you. So we look at our KSAs, we look at knowledge, skills, and abilities. So our knowledge is respiratory care, right? That is our specialty. That is what we know. That is what we love. That is what we do 3 to 4 days a week, right? So with respiratory care, we understand the clinical and the operational needs of the department and generally of the patient. And I'll say operational needs of the patient as in, they might need a BiPAP or this, that, and the other. We think operational, maybe another particular, thinking of COVID, maybe another patient may need something a little more supportive. So we know how we can operate through the healthcare system in our particular role and in emergent situations. Clinical is generally standardized, right? I'm not going to say that all of us know all the same stuff, because that would just be kind of boring, right? We wouldn't be learning from each other, right? So the clinical portion of it is generally standardized. We all kind of learn the same thing, just different ways, sometimes better, sometimes worse. But we all know we're running ventilators, right? We're responding to codes and rapids and births and all those things. And we know what our role is there. Operation will be molded by the facility workflow and other external influences. So I know some of us may have had to stay overnight at a hospital and because of snow or storms or what have you. And what we do know and how we continue to know things is molded by the facility that we work for, right? Different initiatives that the facility wants to undertake, different protocols. I know in Tennessee, it took me, I think, 3 years at a particular facility and before moving to another facility before I was ever even able to intubate. So our workflow is molded by these things, right? And of course, with respiratory, and again, we want to practice under our scope. We look at policy, protocol, and law, right? So I'm not going to see that a patient has a terrible blood gas and go in there and intubate them, write an order from myself, go in there and intubate them, put them on a ventilator, right? That is totally against the law. I cannot do that. At first, without consulting with, a physician or mid-level, something like that. So we will work by our policy. We work with our protocols, and we stay within the bounds of law. Ethics. If you sit through my ethics lecture, then you know that ethics is a mean of running a business in healthcare. So I wrote a paper in regards to death and dying with the respiratory therapist, and I found something very, very interesting. That many RTs hold more grief than other folks, right? And that's the thing when it comes to ethics. RTs say, if this was particularly in a NICU, when an RT goes in codes and it doesn't turn out, me particularly, I never really had time to stick around, debrief, talk about the situation, what we could have done better, what went wrong. So ethics, this is a portion of respiratory that I would say that all of us should always continually hone in on, because we find ourselves, as soon as we agree to a patient stack, we're encountering ethical decisions the whole 12 and a half hours that we're there. Administrative knowledge. We look at other departmental duties and resources. Maybe you need to know who is running your supply chain or where you can get your supplies from. I know that with my facility, we kind of work with a particular DME, and that is where a lot of our supply comes from. If they are out, we are out too. I actually work right next to one of the supply chain managers, so I haven't run into any type of situation like that. We look at in-depth electronic medical record knowledge and navigation. So folks, I know when I was working clinically, I knew where the vent stuff was. I knew where, flow land. I knew where to chart all those things. I knew where my hemodynamics were. But, I didn't know where to get, let's say, a sleep study or compliance report from a BiPAP, right? I didn't know how to, or rather, I didn't even have access. We didn't have access to contact, let's say, case managers and things like that. You went in, you did your part of the job, and that's the part of the EMR that you knew very, very well. So in regards to navigation, look, I have free range over electronic medical records in the hospital, outside the hospital, dead, alive. It really doesn't matter, because of course, if I have a particular need to see that patient or to see that patient's chart, of course, I'm not just dilly-dallying around looking at people's stuff, but I can find, right now anyway, I can find just about anything you're looking for if it has been bridged over to our system. Social knowledge, population health statistics, demographics, and more. This is one of those things I always like to think of cultural competency in this as well when you're thinking of social, because we know that is a major healthcare disparity. Looking at different ethnicities, cultural competencies, or cultural beliefs, tradition, those types of things can be a major health disparity. And my role is a role because there is so much gap, so much disparity between our healthcare. So this knowledge base is very, very helpful. And particularly speaking, when you're able to quote, mass understand, let's say, population health statistics. This for me, it's still Tennessee right now. I know a lot more about Tennessee than North Carolina. You can kind of segment your population, where certain people live, that access is hindered there. You can do a little bit more for those people. Professional knowledge, y'all. I like to think that we are all professionals at this point. We should act professional, and we should have the knowledge to act professional and to conduct ourselves in a professional manner. Skills. So the perk of pulmonary disease navigation, led by an RT, right? It's very specific knowledge and a very specific set of skills. I had, I think it was my first 3 weeks in this role that the case manager came up to me and she was like, "Hey, look, we're needing some help with a trach." And I had just come from a trach facility, essentially a trach facility. It's a long-term care, what have you, and have seen pretty much any kind of trach you can think of. Pull them out, put them in, all sorts of different things with trach. So I was like, absolutely, I'll help you with those things, and was able, that particular set of skills, I was able to get this patient the type of, get them split gauze, get them the right size intercannulas, things like that. And even the physician was like, "Hey, look, I really appreciate it, bro." I wasn't 100% sure. But the not so perk, right? Not many RTs practice administratively. That's one of the reasons I moved out of the role that I was in, because there really wasn't room to move up at that point, right? And in one way, it's kind of a good thing. Those people that I worked with worked there for a long time, right? Now it could be generational with loyalty and things, being loyal to a fault and things like that. But I didn't do anything administrative. I maybe did the count for the next shift coming in. That was it, right? Supervisors and the managers did those things, and again, they were there for decades when I came on. So not many of us practice in that way, and some of us don't want to practice in that way, in that type of situation. Not many RTs have PFT experience. Now, folks, you can argue me all you want now. When you're sitting in school trying to learn PFTs, it's kind of like learning ethics if it's not fun, right? And PFTs, just a lot of the times, they're just not very fun. Some folks just drool over them, but not many RTs have experience with this, and generally, and particularly, they don't have experience doing PFTs or reading PFTs. or interpreting them, I guess. But that's the beauty of this. That's the whole beauty of this whole role, right? It's new, it's developing. And like I said earlier, I hope I'm a resource. I hope it is building mentors, right? Mike Hess and a couple of us get together every now and then, and we try to talk about how we can make this come to light, to make this better, and to do better by our patients, of course, right? So skills, mentoring, you're going to build those skills anyway. Especially, if you've done, let's say you're the first, you built the wheel, right? You created the wheel, where you're going to be the one to show everybody else how it works, right? You're going to be the one to be like, yeah. So there ain't no sides to this. It's a wheel. It don't go, it's not a square, this, that, and the other. You're going to be able to train folks. You're going to be able to motivate them in a way that's outside the acute care. You're going to be able to give them advice. If you run across a situation that you're not sure of, you can reach out. We're a small group right now, right? We're able to build success, to turn direction for patients and for our mentees. We coach, support, and hopefully, as we make our way back around the graphic here, we're able to achieve our goals. And again, I'll say a lot of them, some of them are facility-wide goals, and some of them are really personal goals, right? Abilities. So abilities are a little more difficult to quantify or really even just to try to explain, but are not much more than the capacity to express a skill. Typically, abilities are the tasks. And I'll give you a little bit of an example. It's abilities are the tasks completed on the job. They can be, most of the time, they are innate to the individual. So we think of abilities as I can, I can't, or I could, right? I can't do this. I can't pass this anatomy test because I can't memorize everything. First of all, don't try to memorize, right? You got to learn it. But I can make it through the test very fast, even if I don't do very good, because I have a lot of speed, or I'm very focused and I have a lot of attention on that test. So we kind of see how these play into the task, right? So we look at our cognitive and emotional abilities, right? You say, I can empathize, right? I can catch on to ethical situations. Yeah. Look at the James Rest model here as your gut feeling with ethical situations. It's innate, right? I can understand the subject and I can build on my knowledge base, right? These are innate things. Some folks, they learn something and then that's just kaput. That's just it, right? So I can understand the subject and I can build on this knowledge base. I can think fast. I can plan and organize. And I'm reliable and tenacious. Just for instance, right? These are things that are kind of built into you. Physical abilities. I can manually do these things, right? I've got balance and stamina. I can stand on one leg and pat my head and rub my belly, right? These are the physical things. So skill, think of it as ability is lifting a 50-pound box. Yeah, I know when we all do the physical part of our jobs or what have you, it's like, may have to lift physical or 50 pounds worth of stuff, right? So ability is lifting a 50-pound box. Skill is doing it without throwing your back out consistently, right? So our ability, yeah, we can do it. Yeah, I've got the strength to do it. I've got the cognitive ability to, wrap my hands around the box, pick it up, whatever. But skill is doing it very, very well. Skill, I kind of think of skill as you can learn a skill, but you're not skilled at it at first, right? So what is the job like? Kind of what does it look like for me, right? In kind of the primary care model. So generally I'll go in 8 a.m., right? Clock in 8 a.m., go in, get on the computer, and we have an algorithm, right, that pulls up if a patient's labeled COPD, if they're taking steroids, which the algorithm really needs to be worked on. It pulls things over like respiratory failure with hypoxemia, which we can see a lot with congestive heart failure and things like that. So not every single person is going to be your stone cut and dry, been smoking for 75 years, pink puffer, right? So I'll go in, I'll get my patient list, and I don't really look through them really great at first. I just pull them over if I think that they're going to be a candidate. And of course, this algorithm tells me why the patient's in there. They may have COPD and not had an exacerbation in a number of years. Well, with those types of patients, I may just look at their medicines, make sure they're on the right stuff, and what have you. But then I get my list, and I'll pick out who I want. I'll generally, after I get my list, I'll go and look and make sure everybody that I have has a PFTs. If they don't have a PFT, there's not really a whole lot I can do with them, because we follow the GOLD guidelines. CMS follows GOLD guidelines. And again, I think the new one, the 2023, came out on the 16th, I'm pretty sure. I got it. It's great. Very, very, very informative, very easy to follow. And it's very, very good for the patients. And they feel good knowing that I'm following a guideline that has been mulled over by dozens and dozens of physicians and therapists and nurses and the whole shebang, right? They feel good about that. They trust the system in that way. So I get all my stuff, and those without a PFT, I generally just make them either a bedside spirometry. I'll put in a bedside spirometry order, or I will, depending on how bad the patient seems at first, I may make an outpatient appointment, especially if they're COVID or flu or something like that. They have to have that done outpatient. And we have a pulmonary clinic with, I think, 27 pulmonary practitioners, most of them being physicians, and they do spirometry there. And I think it's literally a 3-minute drive from the hospital. So those are my go-to. I'll send them over there, have their PFT, look it up later after they've left, make sure the pulmonary doctor did what they're supposed to do. And if not, I contact the patient, contact the provider. But let's say they do have PFT, it's within a year. I'll go in and see, I pretty much talk to the patient, hey, the pulmonary navigator, what have you. And I've got a list of things. I've created my own little consult page, and I ask them, do you know what medicine you're on? Are you aware of your diagnosis? And if they're like, yeah, I take albuterol and Trelegy. Trelegy is like the go-to, right? I don't know how many people have transitioned from Trelegy to Respimat, but and then I just kind of go through the list. Are you smoking? No. Yes. How long? Da 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 da. But then I get to the needs and resources, right? All that other stuff's clinical. CAT score, MMRC, the Fagerstrom score, stop bangs, all those. Those are super quick things that I can use to subjectively address the patient, with also using my objective data, of course. But that doesn't really do anything. It's kind of like Affordable Care Act, giving everybody insurance, but not really expanding access in a way. So I want to look, okay, do you have a primary care doctor? Well, no, I don't. I had one, and then they moved, and then this. Set them up. No, you need a primary care doctor. You got a lung doctor? No, my allergist said I had asthma and COPD. No, we need a lung doctor. All right. So we close these gaps. Well, you say, well, what does that really do, right? I say, okay, do you have a ride? Nope, I can set you up with a ride. You got food? Nope, I can get you food. Are you spending a lot of money on your medicines? Yeah, okay. We make sure they have the resources, right? One of the big things that I found is a lot more people have mold in their homes than you would actually think. I think I consulted 6 patients Friday, and 4 of them had mold in their home, and I'm like, guys, that's a major trigger, be it asthma or emphysema or what have you. That is toxic to humans. There's so many different strains, what have you, but I make sure that these patients have what they need. I always say, can you get your medicine, and can you get to your medicine? Yeah. Ask them, is there any chickens, bats, birds, this kind of thing, anything that could cause some type of pneumonias or anything like that. So from what they tell me, and again, I have resources at the facility too, right? So we have what we call Ride Health, and we use Meals on Wheels, which, if I'm not mistaken, is like the largest, or one of the largest. It's nationwide. brings food to people, and people can get food from there. And that's the thing. These people may have a great house and food and car and transportation and all that, but it completely strain them. Are you using food money for medicine money? Are you having to skimp on the electric bill every other month so you can go buy your medicine? These are bad. These are bad things, bad situation, right? You shouldn't have to do those things. So we introduce those resources to the patient. We make sure that they can get to their medicine, they have the right medicine, can take the right medicine. What is it? The right route, right patient, right time, all that stuff. So we make medication and clinical recommendations. If a patient, you ask your patient, hey, are you getting short of breath when you're laying flat? Does anybody ever tell you that? You snore, you treated for hypertension, you got a high BMI, right? You probably need a sleep study. Well, I don't know what that is. Well, you go in, you introduce them, or you have the pulmonary doc come and talk to them, and you explain these things to them. You help them navigate what they need. So folks, with obstructive sleep apnea and stroke and all these things, it's against it's against your metrics, right? Because you don't want these people coming back. It's against your metrics not to address these things. Especially should go against your moral principle to not provide them with these could be life-altering devices and medications and even just decisions, right? Wrap up and follow through. So I go in, see the patient, see what they need, right? I spend that hour with them educating and things like that. That's the thing. All of this is education. I introduce the resources, but I'm educating at the same time. Because they didn't know that these things exist, right? So I get all my stuff, and then I'll go see a couple patients, and I'll come back to the office, and I'll write my notes out. My notes are very, very detailed, but as some of you probably know, not a lot of people read through the whole notes. So very bottom of the page, I'll put in what the recommendation is and why. And then I contact the provider, the attending provider. I'll contact case management, and then I'll make referrals to say social work, or we have a pharmacy inside the hospital that they do that, what they call meds to beds, and they're able to possibly find their medications cheaper, and if anything, bring up their medicine before they leave. So I'll put in all that stuff, and sometimes they'll contact the patient, sometimes they go see the patient, what have you, and make sure that all that's followed through, right? I take the patient's MRN. After they get discharged, I'll say, okay, did they get that Respimat drug? Or did they get some Upelri or glycopyrrolate or something like that, right? So we line up the resources to close the gaps in care, and then I'll try to follow up with the patient 48 hours after discharge. This don't always happen, though, right? Some of these patients, they don't want to be contacted. A lot of times, these patients don't even want to talk to you. They're sick, right? Again, we can refer back to the ethics lecture, which you guys should sit in and listen to. It's pretty good. But they're sick. They don't want to be messed with. Just give me what I need, make me better, and get me out of here. But sometimes it's what's out of here that keeps getting you back in here. Our outcome metrics are generally set by the facility. Yeah. And that's kind of one of those things where there's no scope, right? There is no anything to say, yeah, you can or can't do this. But of course, again, we're going to work within our scope. We're not going to practice medicine without a medical license. But it's flexible as well. Some days I'll have one patient, they'll be so complex, so hard to navigate that's all your time and effort is spent doing that. Contacting this DME agency, contacting power of attorney or legal guardian, or contacting the VA, for Lord's sake, that is just always a hassle. But some of these patients are so complex, so sick, that it will take you all day to really get them set up, squared up, what they need. And I try to make follow-ups with these patients. If I see them right when they come in, I won't do the phone call. I'll just go up to the patient's room and see them. So there's flexibility in that, you may see one patient, you may see 10 patients, but there is no set quota, I guess you could call it. As long as, and we'll see later, as long as our metrics are being met, we are doing our job. Autonomy and communication with leaders, folks. So so it goes my boss, and then my boss's boss is the CNO and vice president. And it's nice to have that in your pocket when you're being met with resistance. Now, folks, I know just as well as you know that, you'll say, hey, doc, maybe they would benefit from this, that, and the others. Are like, ah, good God, buddy, I'm a doctor. What are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. So when you find that situation, when you're using a standardized approach to treating a certain disease, and the care team is resistant, it's always nice to have that in your pocket to be like, hey, look, now, these are our metrics. These are your metrics too. You won't have to answer to me or to your boss. You're going to have to answer to the boss of bosses. Well, close to. And again, it's a disservice to the patient not to do those things. Professional growth and exposure. Oops, let me go back. Sorry. Professional growth and exposure. So that's the thing, right? We have our autonomy. I can I won't say do as I please, of course, but we have the autonomy to, if I see a patient that needs an OPEP, one of my patients, I just go in and I'll order it, right? Per screening, per policy, what have you. And of course, I communicate this with physician leaders and everything like that. And that is really the main kicker with all this is the communication, because I can make all these recommendations. If no one reads my notes, that patient's sitting square right where they was, right? So communication with any type of growth or any type of business endeavor, communication's key here. And the more you communicate, the more rapport you get. The more rapport you get, the more autonomous you are. And the more autonomous, the better you do, the more you communicate, the more professional growth and exposure and opportunities that you're going to have, especially in this niche thing where they're like, wow, these therapists, buddy, they're really kicking it down here, right? They're really doing it. They're really nailing it all down. Let's, I don't know, give them a bonus or something, right? So let's look at healthcare impact with just COPD alone. Folks, there's over 200 different kinds of interstitial lung disease, pulmonary fibrosis, and asthma, bronchiectasis. Y'all already know, right? Let's just look at emphysema, not COPD. Well, COPD is our umbrella term, right? We're going to look at COPD, generally emphysema. Third leading cause of death, right? You would think there would be a lot more attention on this, but a lot of these hospitals, you don't go to a hospital that's COPD certified, I guess, stroke certified, or they got cath labs and admission to needle time and all this stuff. You don't go to a hospital and like, okay, well, yeah, we got this banging COPD thing going on, right? This is a COPD hospital. That's not it. It's third leading cause of death. It's a lot. It's a lot. Costed roughly $50 billion, 50 biggins in total healthcare cost in 2020. That's a lot too, right? $50 billion on one thing. This has increased by $17 billion in the last decade. So if we keep going like we're going to be $67 billion, right? Come on. Our average readmissions costing, and it really depends on the disease, but about on average about $15,000. This is a hospital. I won't say eating that bill, but they're not going to get a big fat DRG, I wouldn't imagine. So researchers and a lot of different researchers noted that about 19 to 22.6, and this range actually does kind of range. I read a couple different articles from 6 up to 27, but I like the 19 to 22.6% of people in the United States who are hospitalized for COPD will be readmitted within 30 days. And COPD is the third leading cause of death in the United States, but it's the third most common cause of hospital readmission among patients receiving Medicare benefits. And folks, if you pick up any kind of book, they're going to tell you Medicare, Medicaid, CMS, they're like always on the verge of bankruptcy, right? They're always like, oh, we got to cut these costs and make this better and do this. Look at COPD, folks. right? Look at emphysema. Look at your smoking population. Why do you think where's all this money going, right? And we could get into that. That's a whole different thing, right? But a third most common cause of hospital readmission. So let's step outside of the financial, the clinical, and administrative, right? It is a decrease in quality of life. And folks, you all know these patients too, that is almost unmatched, right? It's one thing to be quadriplegic or what have you. And it's another to have COPD too, right? Because you can have all those other things and still not be able to breathe. And it's like I tell my patients, this is a headlock you can't get out of. That's the first thing you want to do. Somebody gets you in a headlock, boy, you want to get out of it as quick as you can. You'll scratch your face up, gouge eyeballs out and everything else to get out of it, and you can't. It's a decrease in quality of life. Decreased mobility. That's the thing. There's a big push right now to increase hospital mobility, but we're kind of seeing that maybe fade out just a little bit. Our patient impact. What do you think? We decrease lengths of stay. We decrease costs to the hospital. We look at penalties that the hospitals are fined for these readmissions, and the patient's needs are addressed. So we look at HCAHPS scores and IQR increasing. There's a true continuum of care. Again, our patients are our greatest stakeholders, right? So we use, or a lot of hospitals use what's known as Vizient for metric for success, for grades and leapfrogs and all that other stuff. Patient navigation aligns with current quality-driven metrics by nature itself, right? Decrease cost, increase quality. We identify high-value, high-impact, evidence-based measures that promote better patient outcomes and provide useful information for improvement, decision-making, and payment. Align measures across public and private payers to achieve congruence in the measures being used for quality improvement, transparency, and payment purposes. What are some of them? The major ones being here for the facility itself: mortality, efficiency, effectiveness, equality, safety, and patient-centeredness. And that's a whole nother lecture in and of itself. But our minor ones, or rather your departmental metrics, do they have all the appointments that they need? Have you made all the referrals to meet that patient's needs? Have you made the correct physician referrals? So I can make referrals for palliative care, hospice, psych, what have you. If I think the patient needs it, I can make the referral. And medication recommendations. So this is live. This is our graph here. So if we look at May 22, that's when the other two therapists were in. I had not stepped foot in North Carolina. So June, July, I was the only one. They had all those folks had left. I was the only one for this particular facility. And I was training in June, training in July. Kind of got my groove down in August. And we look at September. Now look at October, 13%. So the value that we're seeing here is tremendous, right? So we went from 8 to 3 readmissions, 5. I ain't doing the math on that, but that's saving $15,000 5 times, right? Hospital loves that stuff. These are live metrics right here. This is 30-day readmissions with COPD patient population for what, 7 months? November hasn't concluded yet, and we're getting there, of course. But yeah, these are live metrics. This is proof that the system works. This is proof that pulmonary navigators are highly, highly valuable. And it's proof that RTs are just as valuable and just as knowledgeable. These are live metrics, folks. That is a steep decline. I'm proud of that there. So funding of the program, guys, look at how much money I just saved them, right? Like many administrative type roles, pulmonary disease navigators account for cost on the back end, right? We're not making profit from nebulizers and vents and things like that. Just like human resources, they just don't make you money on the front end. So again, readmissions cost around $15,000. Let's look at misuse, waste, trial and error, evidence-based driven approaches to care. we fix or try to fix all of those things, right? If you're getting Trelegy, which is crazy expensive most of the time, and it's not working, that's a waste. That's misuse, right? You don't want to trial and error and potentially put that person into debt. Let's look at grants. These types of programs get tons of grants, but with those grants come new initiatives and new responsibilities. Well, further segmentation of specific disease population for even greater savings. So I see emphysema most of the time anyway, but I also look at pulmonary fibrosis, bronchiectasis, right? And I try to fix those people too and get them the care that they need. This is a stepwise growth with proven efficacy, right? The more we do, the more we know, the more money we save, the better it's going to get. So it hints at APRT. How, right? Well, I'm making a medication recommendation, and with some of those doctors that I built rapport with, I just order them myself. I make referral for diagnostic testings, be it EKG, swallow study, PFTs, any of that. If I feel like the patient needs it. Now, diagnostic, I run it by the doc. That's a big charge, but we look at PFT interpretation and disease staging. I can do the PFTs, but they have a PFT lab. So if they can do it in-house, they'll do it in-house or at the bedside. We have an interdisciplinary team interaction, building the scope of what could be an entirely new branch of respiratory care. Folks, that is super exciting to me. Tons of autonomy and RT-driven protocols. But still an RT, right? I'm going to follow our protocols. I'm going to follow our scope, and I'm going to do and work to the extent of my scope, and maybe just a little bit more with the doctor's signature. So we look at some of the competencies, domains for APRT. Yo, it's coming, right? And I think this Navigator thing is kind of skimming on it right now. So what about a future need? Pulmonary navigation is a niche field right now. It's growing, and it's growing from a need for pulmonary disease navigators. It's coming from a need for advanced degrees and advanced practitioners. This is just, to me, this is the middle lane right here, right? Historically low provider rates. We need more navigation. We need more providers, right? We look at volume-based versus value-based, and everything that navigation is value-based. And that is our new switch, right? Can be molded to fit any initiative. You gain these skills, you gain this type of knowledge, you could be a cardiac navigator. Fortunately, well, I won't say unfortunately, but that's what I have to do. I like my COPD people, right? But I'll have to do my cardiac navigation as well. Again, yeah, can be used for other than COPD. The big problem is marketability, function, and scope. We don't have a scope. What is our function really? And how do we market ourselves to other places? Right? I never seen a pulmonary disease navigator in Tennessee. They probably was, but I never seen them. So maybe they just get market to them. Maybe they can't figure out the function. We're in a position now where we can show the benefits of a pulmonary disease navigator program. Folks, I dropped the readmission rate by nearly close to 15%, 20% in just a few months. There needs to be a systematic approach to creating these types of programs, and not only just these types of programs, but how we meet these metrics. Thank you. Remember what I said about them skills? Y'all have good skills. Keith, I'll hand it back to you. I appreciate everybody coming. This has been a fun one.